Most of the time, a head coach loses a Super Bowl. Fans might be upset, say something like, oh, get a new head coach, but no one's available at this point. Thing is, this guy who has 6 Super Bowl wins as a head coach and a couple more as a coordinator is available, wants to coach. Name's Bill Belichick, kind of well known, might be the greatest head coach of all time. One of them. And he's around. Should the Niners get Bill Belichick? Thank you, Kyle. You can't do this.
I brought this up a month
ago. Not as a coordinator, as a head coach.
I brought this up as a coordinator a month ago.
Okay.
We were both standing right there shoulder to shoulder when Jed talked to the media a couple weeks ago. He was going to be happy even if they lost to Detroit. He loves Kyle and John. Kyle and John just got extensions. Kyle and John are going nowhere.
Hold on. I'm not asking what Jed would do. I'm asking what Jed should do. That's a different question.
I actually don't think that I would bring in. I don't think Belichick wants the personnel control, which he did a terrible job with, or anything to do with offensive football, which he did a terrible job with. And you have Shanahan and you have Lynch, and they have a great relationship with Bill Belichick, and there's no rules about what you pay your assistant coaches. So hell yes.
There's no way.
Look at the
if he's willing to come as a coordinator, great. But saving that, say he's like, no, I'm not going to be a coordinator. Would you bring him in as a head coach and say, Kyle, thank you very much. You built this team. You've done so much. You're not going to get us over the hump. We're moving on like the Bucs did from Tony Dungy going to our John Gruden. His name is Bill Belichick. Sorry.
I would not bring him in as a head coach. I would bring him in as an assistant head coach, a defensive consultant, or the defensive coordinator. But
he's not coming unless he's a head coach. I'm sorry.
Well, I disagree, actually. I personally think he just wants a big fat check. I don't think Bill Belichick's about those.
I think he wants to I would think he wants to be the winningest head coach of all time. He's like a few wins away.
I don't think that's his deal. I think he's really wants to coach.
If Bill Belichick ever comes back in the league as anything other than a head coach, I will buy you a $150 bottle of whatever wine you want. I will drive it to your front door. It's not happening, Larry.
But here's the thing. You can throw whatever kind of money you want. So if it's
$200 bottle of wine, whatever you want.
This guy,
that's how confident I am.
I'm
not even asking for anything in return. I'll just give it to you. So tell me why you wouldn't replace Kyle as that's because this is the conversation I want. Why would you're going to get a bottle of wine if you're right? Why do you not want Belichick as the head coach of this team?
Because I think that the head coach of the team's got to do media responsibilities. He's terrible at it. He hates it. He also usually is going to have some kind of final say on personnel. He's not good at that. His game is really as a defensive X's and O's master, and his real game is he's a defense. He's Ray Rhodes 25 years later. He's a defensive backfield genius. And they had the 7th best D this year. The Niners had the 8th best D. They had a better defense this year in New England than the Niners D. And the Niners have 6 good young defensive backs that need to be developed. And you can pay them whatever you want. And I think the Niners need a significant pivot to basically tell everybody that they're new and improved. And Belichick would be the perfect way to do that. And I know it's not Wilkes, and Wilkes isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily Wilkes had a bad game, but they still did drive the length of the field against your defense in overtime. So it's not like Wilkes was awesome. He was okay, and they didn't have Greenlaw. But Belichick, I think, would develop those DBs.
All right, then let's bring him in as a head coach. Here's the thing with Belichick. No, I don't want he had to rebuild the Patriots. He did a terrible job.
Terrible.
He doesn't have to rebuild the 49ers. He has to win one Super Bowl with them, then he can retire and go away forever. And the team's ready to go. You have a hell of a defense. I think it'd be a pretty good situation for him. He wouldn't have to find a new quarterback. He might be able to win with Brock Purdy. He won with Tom Brady, who was a game manager, according to Cam Newton. I think he'd probably want to coach the team. I think it would probably inspire a lot of confidence in the locker room. And you have a guy who's won the Super Bowl 1 million times. That's the whole thing. He would not, if Bill Belichick had a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl, I'm thinking he'd probably win with this team. I don't know. I don't see how you don't at least have lunch with them if you're Jed York and say, hey, what's your vision? If you were the coach of this team, what would you do differently than Kyle? I want to know.
But you got to remember this: Kyle and Belichick and Shanahan and Lynch have great relationship, which is why I think he can work as an assistant. But it's not going to work as Kyle's demoted or Kyle's fired. I don't think that's going to work.
This is what it's like to me.
That's a good move long term either.
This is what it's like to me. Remember in 2020, they lose the Super Bowl. Everyone understands it's Jimmy's fault very much. Tom Brady's available. And people are like, whoa, should we switch from Jimmy Garoppolo to Tom Brady? Like, it's a tough decision. People say, well, Jimmy's younger. He's still improving. Tom's old. He's washed. And they stick with Jimmy, and Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl with Tampa. Is this not similar to that? Like, oh, okay, Kyle's young. He's improving. Is he improving? Bill Belichick's washed. I don't know. Like, if you gave this roster to Bill Belichick, I think he'd win the Super Bowl. That's what I'm trying to say. This is the best roster in the league. Everyone says that. Best roster in the league. And Kyle couldn't win the Super Bowl with the best roster in the league. I think Belichick's won Super Bowls without the best roster in the league.
Yeah, but there's a lot of talk that first of all, Belichick last 2 years was not good. Second of all, he hired defensive coaches to run his offense. They drafted Mac Jones in the first round. They feuded, and they're now going to trade him. Even if he had stayed in New England, they still would have wanted him to pick an offensive coordinator. So he's not going anywhere unless there's a big-time offensive coach going with him. And you want Josh McDaniels? I don't. I'd rather I'd rather keep Shanahan and give Belichick $10 million a year to be the DC for a year. And even if he wasn't the DC, even if he was just the defensive czar in charge of your of your defensive coordinator, let's say you brought in Vrabel,
Larry,
and you said Vrabel, you can be the DC. I personally think you're reading Bill wrong. I don't think that he wants that head coaching record.
All right, man.
I think he wants another ring. I don't think he wants to just coach D. I know that it's.
He's not going to be an assistant coach. Okay, he will die before he's an assistant coach again.
But let's. It's not like this has never happened. Bill Walsh coached Stanford after he was done coaching the Niners, and he came back as a 49er assistant general manager after he had won 3 championships. The father of the forward pass was came back as the Eagles quarterback coach and coach Steve Young with the LA Express. You look at Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Newsome's the best GM in football the last decade. I bumped into him in the press box. I said, Ozzie, what's going on, man? Well, who are you working for? He's like, I'm still here. I'm a personnel consultant working under Eric DaCosta. And this is a guy, and so why? And I'm sitting there going, why? Why would these guys do this? They do it because they're so respected. They're so old, and they don't want to commit to the hours.
He wants the hours, Larry. He wants it. He just interviewed for these jobs. He wants to be a head coach. He just interviewed for these jobs. They didn't want him.
Yeah.
The question is, the Niners want him.
Why didn't they want him?
Because a lot of these places you need to rebuild. He didn't do a good job rebuilding. That Patriots team, you don't have to rebuild here. You just have to win one Super Bowl with the ready-made best roster in the league that Kyle Shanahan hasn't been able to win with. Belichick might be able to do it, considering he's done it before. It's worth talking to him. I mean, and it's like, hey, who's your offensive coordinator? Is it freaking Bill O'Brien? Then no, we don't want you. We don't want you. But if it's, I don't know.
What if it's Matt Patricia? Because that's what it was.
Hell no. Yeah. Hey, thanks very much. Enjoy lunch. Hope you like this lobster roll. Never talk to you again, but I'd like to know. What's his plan? Because what's Kyle's plan? How is he what's he gonna do differently next year? How is he gonna? Is he gonna know the rules?
If Bill Belichick were the head coach, he'd want Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator.
Okay,
he would.
Maybe Bill Belichick goes to lunch with Jed and says, "You know what? Kyle's better than me. Don't hire me. Kyle's better. You may be making a big mistake. Stick with Kyle." Okay,
yeah, good
to know. Thanks. Or he'd say, I would have beaten the Chiefs in that Super Bowl with this roster. This is how I would have done it. This is what I would have done differently than Kyle. Kyle went empty backfield 15 freaking times in this game. I wouldn't have done that. I would have sticked in 21 personnel. I would have deferred in the over. Kyle's finding ways not to win Super Bowls with the best roster in the league. At a certain point, it's not unfair to look around. It's not unfair.
No, but do you get the sense that Jed is in any way close to that?
No.
Yeah. No, I don't either.
But that's his fault.
Yeah.
Eddie would be. Hold on. If Eddie were the owner of this team, he wouldn't he wouldn't go out to lunch with Bill Belichick. I mean, it'd be in secret. He'd do it.
I mean, Eddie did all these things. I mean,
Mhm.
let's be honest. He was the one who brought in Ray Rhodes. He was the one who brought in Mike Shanahan. He was the one who, demanded that those guys, have premier guys. I mean, the Niners had premier players. They had premier coaches, premier players. They lost Holmgren. They said, you know what? Bring in Mike Shanahan. Shanahan was a coach head coach a year later.
You know what Eddie never did, ever? Lose a Super Bowl.